Have you ever tried to explain something really complex and just felt like you were leaving a huge piece out? Well, today we're diving into a mental model that fixes that. It's called the 3x3 experience matrix, and it's basically a coordinate system for, well, reality itself. It helps you see the whole picture every single time. I mean, think about it. The last time you tried to explain something really important, maybe a tough conversation, or a movie that blew your mind, or even just a feeling you couldn't shake, how do you actually capture all of it? So often we end up sharing just a tiny fraction of the story. This whole framework is designed to solve exactly that problem. The trap we all fall into is boiling a situation down to just one thing. We either give the play-by-play of the objective facts, what happened, or we go all in on our subjective take, how I felt. But what if the real truth needs both of those, plus more, all at the same time? It's like the difference between saying I drank a bitter coffee and actually describing the whole ritual of it. Okay, so the foundation of this whole system is built on three really fundamental pillars. A good way to think about them is like the primary colors of experience. You can't break them down any further, but you absolutely need all three to see the full picture. So we've got the self, which is our who, the act, which is the how, and the being, which is the what. These three are our core building blocks. Now, here's the really cool part. There's one simple but incredibly powerful rule that makes this entire system work. We take our three pillars, self, act, and being, and we use each one as a unique lens to look at the others, and even to look back at itself. The formula is just Y seen through the lens of X. This little trick, this self-application, is the engine that's going to build our entire map. So just to make that super clear, the lens is the perspective you're using. Are you wearing your self hat, your act hat, or your being hat? And the domain is the thing you're actually looking at, which again can be the self, the act, or the being. When you combine them, you start to create this amazing 3x3 grid of unique coordinates. And here it is. This is what it creates. Our empty 3x3 matrix. 9 empty boxes just waiting to be filled. Each one represents a fundamental aspect of literally any experience. So let's start filling them in, row by row, using that simple lens-on-domain rule we just talked about. First up, the self-domain. What happens when we turn our three powerful lenses inward to analyze the very nature of the who at the center of it all? Let's find out. So what happens when the self looks at itself? We discover a concept called negation, and this is huge. It's that moment you realize, hey, I am not my thoughts, or I am not my anger. It's our ability to create a little space between ourselves and our internal state, which lets us choose how to act. That space is freedom. Okay. Next, let's look at the self through the lens of the act. What does that show us? It reveals its relation to the world. A self is never just floating in a void, right? It's always pointing at something. It's paying attention, it's forming an intention, it's taking a stance. This coordinate is all about our engagement with everything outside of ourselves. And finally, what makes you, you? What makes a self this very specific self? Well, looking at it through the being lens reveals its limitation. Our body, our place in time, our physical location, our roles in society. These aren't just restrictions. They're actually what give a self its concrete definition. Without limits, the self would just be a vague idea. All right, one row down, 2 to go. Let's move on to the act domain. Now we're going to use our lenses to analyze the how of any situation, the processes, the actions, the events themselves. So when we look at any action through the lens of the self, what we're really seeing is its source, its inner drive. This is its intensity. Was the action forceful or was it gentle? Was it urgent or was it calm? This coordinate points to that energetic push from within that gets the whole thing started. Now, this one's a little trippy. What happens when you look at an act through the lens of an act? This reveals its quality, the specific way it happens. Think of it as the action's personality, its style, its texture. Was the conversation flowing and easy, or was it hesitant and tense? That's its quality. And when we put on our being lens, the action suddenly becomes a thing we can measure. We objectify it. This gives us its quantity. Now we can count the steps in a process. We can define a clear beginning and end. We see the action as a single definable chunk. Okay, time for our final row, the being domain. This is where we analyze the what of experience. Any object, any situation, any raw facts that we come across in the world. When the self lens looks at the being domain, we get a concept with a fancy German name, Dasein. But don't let that fool you. The idea is incredibly simple. It's just the raw recognition that something is there, for you. Before you even know that's a tree, you first just perceive a thing in your field of vision. That basic there-ness is Dasein. Now, what happens when we apply the act lens to being? This reveals its Mitsein, another German word, which just means interconnection. Think about it. A hammer is only really a hammer because of its relationship to nails, wood, and the whole act of building. Nothing exists in a total vacuum. This coordinate shows how any what gets its meaning from its web of relationships. And finally, our last square, looking at being through the lens of being itself. This reveals a thing's Dasein, or its essence. This is what the thing is in and of itself, totally separate from us or how we use it. It's not the hammer's usefulness, it's the hammer's weight, its steel, its physical properties. It's the objective reality of the thing. And there we have it, the completed 3x3 matrix. 9 fundamental coordinates, all derived logically from just 3 basic ideas and one simple rule. This isn't just a random list of cool-sounding words. It is a totally coherent system for mapping out pretty much any phenomenon you can think of. Okay, I know what you might be thinking at this point. All right, that's a really neat little box you've built, but is it just a clever word game? Is this thing for real? And that is an absolutely fair question. But it turns out this framework has a very strong answer. The whole credibility of this matrix really comes down to 3 big tests that it passes with flying colors. First, unavoidability. Try to describe any real situation without mentioning the who, the how, and the what. You can't. Second, independence. You can't squish one pillar into another. The feeling of anger, which is self, is not the same as the act of yelling, which is act. And third, fruitfulness. This thing doesn't just give you new labels, it actually pushes you to ask smarter, more precise questions about what you might be missing. And this is probably the most important takeaway of all. These 9 boxes are not a checklist of separate parts you can take apart. They are aspects, they're true coordinates that all define a single point. You know, just like X, Y, and Z axes define a location in 3D space, these 9 coordinates define an experience in reality, letting you see the whole thing at once. So what you have now is a brand new and incredibly versatile tool in your mental toolbox. It's a coordinate system that you can lay over any problem, any argument, any personal experience to make sure you are seeing the whole picture clearly and completely. But all of this leads to one final, really fascinating question. We've mapped out the top level of experience, right? But if this is a true map, what happens when we zoom in? What if you took this entire 3x3 grid and applied it to just one of these squares? Now that is a thought for next time.